Okay, I'm just conscious of the time getting away this evening, but we'll just have a few questions for Paul. Thank you to those you guys who've joined us, and hope to see you again. Blessings. Okay, so Paul, this has been a brilliant critique, but where does it leave us as Christians? What are some starting points for a way forward?
Okay, let's start with the simple ones.
Do you want to come back over there so they can see you
on? Okay. There's much more interest in interdisciplinary studies now than there has been before. So if you're studying science, do some theology as well. If you're studying theology, do some science. And see if you can make them talk. Paul was just talking to me, Paul Mercer, about evidence-based medicine and the complexities of trying to get Christian medical students to think about how their faith works in that context. We just need to grapple with these things. We just need to recognise them as problems and actually get in the mud pit and have a go. Is that a good enough answer?
Yeah, I really like that answer, Paul. I think in education at a kind of school level, that's a conversation that's definitely happening. We're realising that we've got all these silos and kids are not actually transferring their understanding from one subject area to another. But when we deal with the real world, we actually need to bring in those transdisciplinary perspectives in order to really sort of grapple with that. So that's useful, and I definitely encourage people to continue to learn broadly. Okay, so this is a great one. Why are we only interested in the measurable?
There's a simple answer.
Okay.
I'd say it's called idolatry. Let me try and unpack that a little bit. Okay. So William Desmond is really great on this about different modalities of understanding. Okay, so the determinate categories of knowledge are great for immediate control in tangible domains. It makes us feel like God. And whereas the indeterminate makes us feel like a creature and even like a child, okay? And the ability to embrace the wonder and unmasterable nature of creation and the Creator requires a type of courage and trust. And if you can't do that, then you fall back onto the purely determinate and the sense of control. So I think that's why.
Whoa, you kind of just got to sit with that one for a while, don't we? Okay, there's so much diversity in the questions, so I'm just going to go with the next one. The question of proofs. Do you think you can prove Christianity with science or vice versa?
No, definitely not. Proof is way overrated. Okay. Now, it can be underrated too, don't get me wrong, right? And there are wonderful things you can do with evidence-based medicine, right? But you can't prove love, you can't prove a soul, you can't prove even what thought is. You can't prove that people think, right? So all the things that really matter, you can't prove. Does that mean we just ignore them? Of course not. Okay, so proof is a great thing, but it's not everything, and it needs to be in its place.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this one,
Just one more thing on that, okay? So there was a huge mistake called the Enlightenment which is premised on the idea that we only need reason and experience, and we don't need faith. Okay? And so reason and experience will give us truth, and faith is just a sloppy, superstitious way of saying, I don't know. Now, the problem is, faith is actually the grounds of reason, theologically. And once you say, let's separate faith and reason, you end up spiralling into unreason. And this is exactly why modernity produces post-modernity.
Okay, so my follow-up question to that one would be, if you wanted to read some more about why you need faith as a ground for reason, what would you recommend reading?
If you want a crunchy read, I'd go to Kierkegaard's Concluding Unscientific Postscript.
Okay. Some more.
A not so crunchy read, I would go to my book Returning to Reality.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, would you say that the schism between astrology and astronomy in the Roman Church points to the beginning of the loss of meaning? Please interrogate.
Wow. Who gave me this question?
The ladies up the back.
Amazing. I heard a fantastic paper on astrology and economics. So you may not be aware of this, but in the early days of the Royal Society for the Advancement of Knowledge, they were really interested in astrology. And they did all sorts of empirical tests on whether astrology gave you a good outcome or not. And in a contemporary analysis, the odds are much the same as economic predictions, and actually slightly better. So we still do astrology, it's called economics. And maybe there's some use to it, I don't know. Sorry, what was the question?
Just whether the
the
separation
schism
between the two. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, look, this is really about the separation of a sympathetic natural philosophy from an an instrumental natural philosophy, and that is that's a 16th century thing that predates the scientific revolution, and you couldn't have the scientific revolution without it. So yes.
Okay, could you say something about ethics and how it fits into this divide?
Okay, so the big problem with ethics is it loses its way. I don't know if any of you read McIntyre's After Virtue. Any hands up? One at the back. Good. Okay. Have any of you heard of Charles Taylor's The Ethics of Authenticity? Good. 2 hands. Excellent. Okay. So ethics is a lost cause because the separation of metaphysical, theological grounds from practical action has made us try and think about ethics only in terms of practical action, which has become utilitarian. So Kant's deontological ethics tries to be purely rational, and Bentham's utilitarian ethics tries to be purely empirical. But in the end, there's no moral reason why you should be rational, and there's no moral reason why just being rational can't be used entirely for evil. And there's no moral reason why pleasure is good. Okay? It's just a preference. So unless you have a substantive metaphysical and theological understanding of the good, ethics just becomes about power in the end and about words, right? So it's gone. And the only way we can get ethics back, and this is, I don't know if any of you have heard of ethics committees that companies have, right? They're not about ethics at all. They're about protecting their own butt, right? Yes. So that's what ethics has become. It's become a butt-protecting public relations exercise. And we lose it if we don't have theology. If you don't have a faith grounds for value and meaning in the way you approach practical action, practical action becomes its own thing and it loses any moral framework.
Paul, thank you so much for your time today.